TJ, welcome to the Potter Buchanan Show. How are you, brother?
I'm good, dude. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to have you on, obviously being a Swampscott firefighter. I think that's super dope. And like a lot of people I've talked to are like in the tech space, but no one who's doing like a hands-on man job. So I wanted to get your takes on that, but also like your journey to getting there. So you went to Keene State. What did you study there?
Yeah, so at Keene State, I majored in psychology and then I minored in criminal justice. So, in high school, I didn't really fully know what I wanted to do. You
Yeah.
talk to your parents, you're trying to get a grasp of, I don't know, what you're into or what you might like, which I really didn't know. I was 17. So obviously I know it a lot more now than I knew then. But I was big into like CSI, TV shows, stuff like that, Criminal Minds when I was growing up. So I said, you know what, let's take a stab at psychology with the minor in criminal justice. Cause I think in like fifth grade at my graduation, we had a little thing of like what you wanted to be. And
Yeah.
I, like a lot of kids, you throw in police officer and firefighter because you got those guys visiting the schools and stuff like that. So that was always something in the back of my brain. But we started with psychology and then kind of put the criminal justice minor as, I don't know if you want to call it a safety net, but just another option that can kind of coincide with psychology if I wanted to end up doing that forensic type psychological background thing like those TV shows.
That would have been sick. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I took some classes on it there and they were super interesting. I will say when I was in college taking those courses, those were probably I'm not a big school guy, wasn't a huge fan, but those classes I was actually would really dive into it and would kind of be excited to do the research end on that, which I never really liked doing that in school. But that particular topic I was interested in. So that's kind of what led me to Keene State is they had both those options. Is I looked at a handful of schools, and you obviously see what they have in their program in terms of majors, minors, stuff like that. And Keene State had both those, so that's kind of how I ended up there doing that.
Nice. So then we were actually on the prance when I first talked to you about doing the project. People don't know what the prance is. We basically get the boys together and we prance, you know?
Yeah.
I think, but so the CO life is something I wanted to get into because that's a crazy job to do. How did you get into that? Like, where'd you start? What prisons were you at? And how was that?
So that kind of started, to be honest. I got out of college. I worked at a grocery store all through high school. I kept the same job at
Me too, dog.
uh,
Whole Foods represent.
it was yeah, I was at Crosby's in Salem. And
Nice.
they were great in terms of when I went away to college, they were like, you can keep your job. And when you come back from break and stuff like that, you can still get shifts. So it was kind of an easy option for me at the time to still have work when I'd come home for the summer and winter break and all that stuff. So I got out of college and was still employed there. So I just had something to go back to. And then I started looking into jobs, this, that, and the other thing. With the major in psychology, and I slowly figured out that a bachelor's degree in psychology doesn't really get you much of anything at all. You have to kind of keep pursuing it and go for either a master's or a doctorate. So
Yeah.
I did end up enrolling in a master's program at Salem State, which I think I just mentioned. I wasn't a big school guy. I didn't make it very far. I
That's
I was probably in there like a few weeks, and you have like this grace period where if you unenroll, you'd get all your money back and stuff, and it wouldn't count. Naturally, I waited until like a week after that deadline, then I unenrolled. So I, I was already locked into paying for the whole thing, but I ended up kind of dropping out of the master's program, and then I was kind of just looking for jobs. You're trying to make ends meet at that point. You're trying to
yeah.
start paying for student loans and all that. And I started out doing a couple of like intro level security jobs at like, working for a contracted company for like FedEx and stuff like that and basically doing loss prevention stuff like that. Again, obviously that's not quite enough to pay the loans these days. So I had a couple people I knew who had worked at one of the jails. And then actually I was cruising through the newspaper, looking at sections in there, old school style. And they had a job posting for the sheriff's department that they were looking to hire people at the jail there. So I know you said prison, so it was jail, slightly different.
Yeah, yeah.
But so I ended up, yeah, I ended up applying at the jail there. It's obviously not the job that you're necessarily going to grow up being like, I'm hoping to go to jail every day and do that. But it was tough finding a gig. You're just trying to find your way when you're, young 20s, stuff like that, fresh out of college. You don't know a ton about the world or whatever. So it was kind of for job stability. At a, pretty good paying gig. So it was just kind of the best option for me. I did have the criminal justice minor, so I don't know. I guess it made sense for the time. So that's kind of how I ended up getting into it, was just through finding it in the newspaper and saying, "Hey, I need something that's kind of more of a career path as opposed to really like something that was kind of a part-time job."
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is some stability in it, right? Like people do that like for their career. And then you can kind of move up, right? Like you
In the
can
jail?
yeah.
Yo, 100%. That's absolutely a career job. I've actually made a lot of friends of guys who started out there and then they end up transitioning to either becoming a police officer or, there's some guys who did fire. But there's you start out as your base level, correctional officer, and then it's kind of your paramilitary ranking system. You can go up to sergeant, lieutenant, captain, a deputy, obviously the sheriff, stuff like that. So there's 100% room for growth in there. And I saw that, so it was just kind of something that I thought, okay, maybe I can make something myself there.
What did you tap out at ranking wise?
I was just a correctional officer, so I did
Yeah.
about 3 years there. I was there from 2017 to 2020, and I had taken the civil service exams for the police and the fire at the time, which there's waiting lists and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I had kind of gotten in there, seeing if that would lead anywhere. I mean, I actually kind of thought I had a pretty good grasp on that job. Met a lot of good people. I liked a lot of the guys I worked with. And after a few years, I kind of was like, all right, I'd kind of come to terms with this is what I'm going to be doing. I was pretty comfortable with it, to an extent, obviously. But I thought I was pretty good at it, and I thought that's what I'd be doing for the next handful of decades.
Yeah. What is a typical day like there? Like you go
Yeah.
in,
So it
check on people. And so jail and prison, do what's the difference?
the difference basically is you have like pretrial inmates as well as sentenced inmates.
Yeah.
Um, and then basically you can get sentenced and still stay in the jail, or depending on what the charge is, if it's over a set amount of time, I think it's 2.5 years or something. If you're sentenced for an individual charge is over that, then I think you'd end up going to prison as opposed to staying in jail.
Yeah.
But you can
Prison's the
do
real
like
deal.
2.5 years, I think is, I believe anything that or less, you'd stay in the jail, and that's like per charge. So you could end up doing more than 2.5 years in the jail, but it would just be from a separate charge. If there was one charge that goes over that, then that would result in probably going upstate.
So were there guys like you knew? Like you ever see a guy come in, come out, and then come back and be like, "Hey, what's up, man?"
Yeah, sadly, like kind of often.
Yeah.
There was a lot of those, the repeat offender type things. I always said to the guys when they were like, "Oh, CO, I'm getting out today." I would, genuinely speaking, because you gotta, these guys are people too. And
Yeah,
so I
no,
would
100%.
genuinely tell them, I'm like, dude, I hope I never see you again. Like, and I
Yeah,
mean the best way possible. But yeah, unfortunately sometimes, yeah, they get out and then shortly after they'd return.
yeah. So what did like on a day-to-day basis, you're just checking cells, just like typical kind of what you'd see on like 60 Days In or something? Cell checks, like stuff like that, or what were you in your role?
Yeah, a little bit. It depends what shift you're on. Obviously, it's a 24-hour business,
Yeah,
they're always open. If you're on, what did I started out, I had done first and second. I worked a little bit here and there on third, but I was never permanently assigned to the third shift. So if you're on first shift in the mornings, yeah, you kind of go in, you do your count, make sure that everyone's accounted for. You'll get kind of a quick rundown from the guy who works third shift before you. Kind of like, okay, you know, um, this is your count for the day. This is how many guys are on the unit. Sometimes a few of them might have had court that morning, so they were already out of the unit. A lot of those guys getting transferred to courts, they were out of their cells and over down to the transpo area early, like 6 in the morning or something like that. Whereas first shift would get on at 7. So, but you kind of get all that information from the guy before you, and then you kind of would, first thing you would do is go around, do your count, make sure everybody's accounted for, where everyone is. stuff like that. Make sure, their windows are clear so you can kind of see in there. There's nothing bad going on. Then, yeah, you kind of work your way to breakfast. You kind of keep checking. You have to do rounds on the unit every so often. I'm trying to remember. It's been quite a few years since I was there, but I think it's every 30 minutes you got to do a full round, top and bottom tier. Same thing, make sure the windows aren't covered up or whatever, make sure there's no funny business going on. And then they would have set times where they'd come out of their cells for rec time, which could include them hanging on the unit watching TV or playing chess and checkers, or they might be going to some educational courses in the
Yeah.
programs building, or taking, Bible study, religious stuff, anything like that. But yeah, that was kind of, you have that kind of change every hour or so. There was different programs every hour. There was some at, 10 in the morning, some at 1 in the afternoon, whatever. So you're kind of just handling, you could pull up on the computer what guys were going to what class at what time. So it's not like they could come up and say, "Hey, I'm going to this," and they can just go. There
Yeah.
was an accounting system to make sure, like, yes, they're enrolled in this program and I'm going to this at this time, and they're received on the other building. So they're not, lost out in the wherever. And then keep doing your rounds, and, again, feed them lunch later in the afternoon. But that's kind of what your typical day was going around checking the cells. You'll do cell searches, a handful of those a day, just at random. That way they don't know what's coming. Yeah, send them their programs, feed them chow, stuff like that.
Were you ever scared at all, or like is it like the jail environment? You kind of felt comfortable. Like would stuff break out?
Yeah, I mean, I was when I first started there, yeah, there's an intimidation factor for me anyways. It's probably different on a case to case basis, but those,
Yeah.
when you first start out and you're going in there, those guys will try to test you, what they can get away with, or, I don't know, they'll just look at your appearance, maybe try to, pick at some of your insecurities, see how you respond to stuff like that. So, yeah, there was definitely a little bit of an intimidation factor when you start. You just don't know what to expect. It's not, a normal life that you're used to seeing every day. And you don't know these guys from a hole in the wall. So, yeah, there was a bit of a factor there, but I don't know how long that lasted for me. I don't think it was too long. And then you kind of slowly try to develop some sort of rapport with those guys on your unit, try and get some sort of understanding, these are the rules, this is that. And then after a while I got pretty comfortable where it's like, this is just what it is.
Yeah. Was it like after a while? I assume like you go in, you're like, "Hey, what's up, Steve? What's up, Jim?" And you know all the guys like on the floor, and you're just saying hi to
Yeah,
everyone.
I mean, so every year there was like a job bid, and you could bid to different types of jobs, like, transporting the guys to court versus being on a
Yeah.
block or working the chow hall. But I ended up being on one of the units for like a couple of years. So at that point, yeah, every once in a while, one guy will get released or transferred, and then you get new guys coming in. So obviously there's some changing, some moving parts, but yeah, for a lot of those guys who, some of them were on there for the full 2 years that I was assigned to that particular block. So yeah, you get to know them. Um, and you just try and, again, develop this sort of rapport where it's not going to make either of your days like a living hell type deal.
Yeah. Yeah. A mutual like coexisting where you can be in this place that like be honest, like neither wants to be. Nobody really likes to work in general, and then you're at work and they don't want to be there.
Yeah, no, they definitely didn't want to be there, but yeah, I mean, you try to you set these ground rules. They have a handbook, so they know what the rules are, anyways. But obviously, yeah, they try to push the limits here and there. And, of course, occasionally, shit breaks out and stuff like that. But um, you try to treat them with a level of respect that, again, they're still humans.
Yeah.
So
100%.
you try to be pretty firm in what your rules are, and it's kind of like, hey, dude, these are the rules. If you don't break these, then I'm going to treat you with respect. If you start disrespecting my unit and my rules, then it's going to be a problem for both of us, and it's just going to make your day harder, my day harder. So, here they are, lay them out. You follow them, and I follow them. Like, we're gonna have, it's gonna be a lot smoother on a day to day basis. Relatively speaking. Again, you're stuck in there. Nobody wants to be there, but can be smoother than, or it doesn't have to be as difficult as you'd think if you kind of work those relationships a little bit.
Yeah. What do they give you for like what do you have on you for like protection if something breaks out?
Inside, if you're inside, Nothing really.
Nothing?
No. So if you're like on transpo or doing a detail, some guys, if there's any medical issues, they end up going to a hospital. So if there's that, then you'd have a firearm with you, a baton, pepper spray, stuff like that. I do think it's changed since I left. I think now they might have some spray in there, but when I was there, there wasn't anything really. I mean, you pretty much had a flashlight, because at night when it's dark and the lights are off, you're still gonna be able to peek in there and see what's going on. You'd have a pair of cuffs, but you're not using that as a weapon. So
Yeah.
it's obviously if shit hits the fan, you'd have to try and do what you got to do. But no, you weren't armed with anything when you were inside.
Interesting. I would think you'd have like a baton on you at least, but I guess
Yeah, like I said, if you're on the road and stuff, you will. But in there, no. If something goes wrong, you call the response team, and then you have manpower and stuff like that. Uh, but you're trying your best to de-escalate. You
yeah,
don't want to escalate the situation and make it worse. But yeah, I don't know what the deciding factor was, but yeah, no, inside you wouldn't have any of that stuff. A lot of times, same thing. If I was treating these guys with respect, they usually weren't trying to go after me
for
unless I
sure.
kind of wronged them in some type of way. And that at that point, you're not really doing your job if you're going out of your way to, piss them off.
For sure. So 2020 transition in looking to get into firefighting. What did that look like? You had to pass the initial exam first?
Yes. So at the time we were under civil service, which was a statewide exam. Like you'd sign up on it through the mass.gov website. So in those at the time, same thing. It's all kind of changed since I went through the process, but at the time when you took the exam, it'd be good for like 2 years. So I had taken it two or three times, and I think I had been on the waiting list for the fire department from before I even got the job at the jail.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but it's a highly sought after job. The waiting lists are long. Some of the guys you're competing against are, smart guys with great resumes, or, sometimes they have the military background. That's always a bonus. So I had taken, yeah, like I said, two or three times. And then I got an email from the fire department, and it was right about at the end of when my test score was about to expire. Like it had almost like slipped my mind that I was still on that waiting list because, like I said, I had kind of gotten comfortable doing the jail thing. I had started kind of looking towards maybe taking a promotional exam there and being like, all right, where can I move up from in here? And then that email came, and it was like, oh, shit, like this could still happen. So at the time, I literally ended up talking to my wife, being like, "Should I make this transition?" Like, I wasn't even sure I was gonna do it because I had gotten so comfortable, like, doing the job I was doing, and I thought I was pretty good at. And she was like, "No, like, you've been on that list for a while. Like,
Yeah.
you're out of your mind to pass it up." And, I was like, "You're right." I had definitely kind of envisioned as a kid, I was thinking maybe, I'd get on the fire department as opposed to working in jail. So kind of thought about, you talk to your family, stuff like that. And I grew up in the town that I work in. So you do the pros and cons list. And then, yeah, it was like, okay, this is definitely the direction I want to go. So I had taken the written exam. Then you have to take a physical abilities test. It's like 7 stations. That same thing. It's not just for our department. That's all the departments pretty much make you take this test, which is pretty grueling. Like it's not that it's the toughest thing in the world, but you're going 100 miles. It's like 7 stations, and you take no break in between. You're just going 100 miles an hour the whole
Yeah.
time. Well, at the end, you're absolutely gassed. So I had taken the written exam. I had taken that a
What
couple
do they
times.
have you do? What do they have you do? Like, is it like an obstacle course or what is it?
In a roundabout way, a little bit. Yeah. So you start out and you'd wear like a weighted vest because obviously we wear a bunch of gear and stuff
Yeah.
that weighs a lot. So toss on a weighted vest and you start ripping a Stairmaster for a few minutes so they get your legs burning before you even really start the whole thing, which I tell the other guys, I'm like, that was probably the worst part was the Stairmaster at the beginning. They're like, get those legs on fire before they even really start the clock. So you get that going, and then there was different stations, they had a little pulley thing that was weighted. You do that, and grab like a ground ladder, run it over to an area. And that was one of them. Another one was basically insinuating like dragging a hose. It was just a wicked heavy rope because if you get like a hose line that's filled with water, they're pretty heavy. So you drag this weighted rope that was pretty comparable to the hose line through. It was like almost like a U-shaped cage type thing, like a chain link fence, but you had to like crouch down to get through it. Then you're trying to take the turns around the corner, and the ropes getting snagged on the corners, which is insinuating going through a house, taking
Yeah.
corners. That hose line can get caught up on stuff. So that was one of them. They do another one with it's basically like a blackout maze to insinuate not being able to see if you're inside a burning building. So it's basically like a wooden box maze that they just kind of made, and it's you can't see anything in there. So they'll start the timer. You go through there, and you got to feel your way to the other side. I remember the first time I did it, I went like full speed right into a wall because you just can't see. Like smashed my head because you can't see anything. So there was that one. Then there's another one. You kind of use a sledgehammer and hit this weighted thing a certain distance. They had another one that was like a sandbag drag, basically. I think it was 100 and something pound sandbag. And same thing, you had to crouch down, and it was this little. It wasn't fenced like like the hose one, but it was a small little rectangular area that you had to crouch through and pretty much drag this sandbag through if you had to get a victim out of a house. So same thing though, you're kind of on your hands and knees trying to drag it behind you. So it's pretty heavy, and again, you're just gassed from doing all these back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
Um, and the last one was they would have you basically pull down. I think it was weighted, but you'd have to pull down to insinuate pulling ceilings. We have these hooks that you'll jab them into the ceiling and pull them so that way you can see if there's any fire up in the ceiling. So you'd pull down, and then there was another one. You do trying to remember what the reps on it was. You do a handful of those, and then you go to another one which was pushing up on like a little hatch that was kind of weighted, and you had to do, I think it was 25 reps of each or something in an allotted time. And same thing, that was the last one. So you're completely gassed. I get like sweaty hands all the time, so barehanded, I was pulling down, I like ripped my hand open on the wooden stick or whatever. So it was miserable while you're getting through it. I mean, at no point did I think I wouldn't be able to pass it, but it's like running 100-yard sprint, right? You know you can get it done, but you're still gonna be huffing and puffing at the end. It was kinda like that. So I was
You're a gritty guy.
yeah, well, you gotta be. You gotta pretty much a lot of it's mind over matter. You're tired, you're huffing, you're keeled over, all that stuff, but you gotta be convinced that you can do it. If you go in there thinking you're gonna fail it, then or wanna give up, it's not gonna go well for you. So, yeah, you kinda just grit it out.
Yeah, you're cooked if you have the wrong mindset with that.
Exactly.
Well, it sounds exactly like it is a firefighter obstacle course. Like it's essentially testing each thing you could do. Is there a certain amount of time that you have to do it in?
They are. I don't remember exactly what it was. They're not telling you, what your time is necessarily as you're going along. And that's what I mean. So you just have to go pedal to the floor because you're not sure, if you've passed all these, different obstacles or whatever in the allotted time. So you just have to keep going as fast as you can. And then yeah, it's like a pass fail type thing on those 7 stations. And I don't remember. Each one would have been a separate time because obviously
Yeah.
they're all different types of things. I don't know exactly what there were. You have, a state employee or some sort of I'm not sure how those guys got their positions. A lot of them I think were firefighters. I'm not sure if you can apply through it, some other way, but they're there with the stopwatches and a clipboard and stuff. But they're just telling you go, go, go. You don't know how you're doing while you're doing it. So you just have to assume you're doing well and just keep going as fast as you can.
When do they tell you that? Like thumbs up, thumbs down? Right after?
No, it was you pretty much get an email because same thing. It's been a few years, so I don't remember exactly how it progressed, but I know once you take the exam, it'd be a few months before you actually got your score back. And then you'd be, clear for that physical abilities test. And then it's pretty much, I'm trying to remember. I don't think it was long for the abilities test to get your score, or not score. It was just, again, pass fail to get it back. But it wasn't the written test took a few months to get everyone graded and send out the emails and all that stuff. But the abilities one I think was pretty quick because they knew right there. Obviously, they weren't telling me right away. You could kind of tell, I think, when I was leaving by the look on some of their face. You try to read
Yeah.
them, read the body language, and you're like, "Oh, I crushed that, like, I'm all set."
Yeah, they probably can. Yeah, they'd look pretty disappointed, or at least like it'd be tough to hide if you really blew the physical abilities test, I think.
That would be brutal. But they're all, they're all people too, so they're you'd like to think they're pulling for you. They don't want you to fail and stuff like that. You'll get the occasional, "Hey, nice work, keep it up" type deal. So if I was hearing stuff like that, I felt like I was in a pretty good spot. I think if you were failing miserably, they'd probably keep their mouth shut and be like, "I'm not gonna pour salt on the wound here." But if you're hearing good work, keep it up type thing, I think it was pretty safe to assume you're in a decent spot.
Yeah. All right. So you get that, you pass those two, but then how long does it take to like actually get in and you're ready to go?
So the first time you took those, all that did was put you on the eligibility list, so to
Okay.
speak, basically, and then you were on an active list for, whatever towns you wanted to be looked at for. So I had just stuck with this town. I didn't put on a bunch of other cities and stuff like that, which could have possibly sped up the process. Obviously, bigger cities have more employees; they're hiring more people at a time. So you can kind of mess around with your mass.gov like profile if you're under the civil service, I think, and kind of add communities. I didn't do that. And then you kind of wait, which is probably the most nerve-wracking part. You have no idea if they're going to contact you, when they're going to contact you. You could see where you were sitting on the list. If you're like top 3, top 5 in a small community like ours, you're like, okay, I could get on pretty soon. If you're sitting around, 10 or 12, it might be a few years to get hired, which when I think the first time I took the test, yeah, I was hanging out, down around, I don't know, 8, 9, 10, something like that. Um, which we just don't have that many employees who are going to be retiring at one time to get on
Yeah.
that next hiring cycle, which is why I ended up taking it a few times. Once I did move up to, that top 5 spots or whatever, I assume they sent out a handful of emails. I was one of them. They hold their interviews, and then it probably went pretty quick. I think once I got contacted by the department, it was probably like a total of maybe 2 months before I was actually, stepping foot in the building, because you have to go through, an interview with the chief. When I did it was the chief, the captains, lieutenants were in on the interview process, and then you'd have to do a second interview, which was with the town administrator, who, would kind of sign off and make you the town employee. Go and get your physical checkup, make sure there's no, health complications or something that
Yeah.
would affect you being able to do the job. So they ask you your medical history, stuff like that. And then, go get fitted for gear at some point, all that stuff. But yeah, I would say it was probably about maybe 2 months from the second they said, "Hey, you've come up on the list." And again, sometimes people were waiting for a few years. So you'd have to go in and just sign like a letter of intent that, yeah, you still want to even be hired. So that was part of it as well. Like, it's not like they just contact you and they're like, "Come in for an interview," because they don't even know what you've been up to for the last, year, 2 years.
Yeah.
That was a little different than most normal jobs. You go in there, sign this sheet of paper, that way they know you're still interested in the gig.
Yeah. And I think that's important, like for anyone who wants to get into it, like how can if you're 18, like is that like your threshold for signing up? Like I want to be a firefighter? Because you want
It
to get
would
in early as possible, right?
Yeah, it depends on it's depends on the department, that with age and stuff like that. I know some places have, no upper age limit. In terms of getting hired, like ours is 21.
Yeah.
So, and then same thing, sometimes some places are like, okay, if you're over, the age of 35 or 40, they might not be looking for that, because then it'd be harder to keep the employees around, because you can age out from the job.
Yeah.
'Cause obviously it's physically demanding, so I mean, you can't be 75 years old working at the fire department. So, yeah, I think once you're again, our department's 21. I don't know off the top of my head if you can probably take the civil service exam at 18 maybe,
I would
but I
think.
don't know. Don't quote me on that. So, I'd have to look that one up.
Yeah. All right. So you get your fitted for your gear, like you're ready. Like how long before you actually is that I'm in the firehouse now, and if a fire breaks out, like I'm going, or is there like a delay before you're like actually allowed to go like fight a fire?
There's like a slight delay, but same thing. Sometimes it's like a department to department, basis. When we started, it was a mandatory 2 weeks of day training. So you weren't actually counted as like a body who was on shift. You'd have to go through a bunch, kind of like a beginner level training. Because a lot of the things you use, a lot of the equipment, unless you've been doing blue collar work for a while or at a family member or someone who's on the fire department, a lot of this equipment's kind of foreign to you.
Yeah,
So you go through, like I said, I did, I should say. I went through a 2 week day training where, you're with the deputy chief. He's kind of giving you a lot of information. You're working a bit with the on duty crew about how, they go about their day or how they respond to different calls. You got to kind of know the guys you're riding with, like who grabs this, what's the deal with that. So no, you don't go on right away. It's a couple weeks, and then you're on a probationary period. But then you'll start probably taking calls. We're all required to be EMTs as well because a lot of our job is medical calls now. There's
yeah,
a ton of calls like that. So we're all required to be licensed EMTs as well. So you'll take that. That's probably a majority of the calls these days is actually medical calls. But after those first few weeks, yeah, it is possible that you could be responding to a house fire.
please.
Our department, we have you wear the shields on the helmet.
Yeah,
We're a firehouse where ours is numbers, our call signs 21. But when you're brand new that first year, you're wearing a shield that has PROB, which is just probationary. That way, especially if you're going out of town, and there's the chief there or whoever's in command of the scene there is kind of, firing off orders, telling this person to do that. So that
yeah.
way, that helmet identifier is to tell them, like, okay, this guy's a probationary guy, so don't throw him into something that he's not going to be able to handle.
Yeah, yeah, if it's going down, you can't just be like, "Hey, you," and you're just like, "Fuck, I don't even know I don't even know
Yeah,
how to do this."
yeah, dude, you're looking at a building going down, and again, you're out of town. These guys don't know your experience level.
Yeah,
So I think that shield's a great identifier, especially when you leave your community, because we work, hand in hand with the surrounding communities. Obviously, if certain things get out of control, they got a call for backup, so to speak. And so we'll go and work with those guys in the surrounding community. So you're not going to know the chief personally or anything like that. You might run into him here and there at certain training things or at a emergency scene. But other than that, they're not going to necessarily know you. So having that shield is a good indicator for them to not ask too much of you too soon.
yeah. I think I should have called the whole segment here "Dumb Questions for a Firefighter" because I don't really know anything, but I'm, like, genuinely curious. So, like, can you do anything on the truck? Like, is there a hose guy, ladder guy, driver, and then, like, different skill sets? Or are you required to know everything if you're going out for a fire?
So our department, you're basically required to know everything. I know there's other departments where a lot of times there's like a designated guy who drives, whether that's the engine or a designated guy who drives the ladder truck. I think when you're at a larger department, you can have that luxury a little bit. I mean, I'm not sure. I haven't worked at a big city, but in terms of our department, we have limited number of guys.
Yeah,
So, and then if somebody calls out or whatever, and I go to pick up an extra shift, all of a sudden the dynamics change. If I have 6 years on the job, I could be replacing a guy who has 20, or I could be replacing a guy who has 1. So you have no idea exactly every day, what crew I don't know next week what crew I could be on with. Somebody could go on vacation, all of a sudden you're subbing in somebody else.
yeah,
So for us, we have to know how to do a little bit of everything. You take it slow. It's not like they throw you every position right off the rip. The probationary guys for us end up riding back step of the engine right behind the captain, kind of get to learn that job first. And I think I sat on that step for almost like a year. And it was basically just worry about this position and figuring out this aspect of the job. And then you slowly start integrating other parts of the job. There's, driving's a whole new thing. There's a big pump panel, the whole inside of a fire engine is just a massive pump basically that can control the water pressure and all that. So that's a whole other skill that they teach you a bit at the academy, and then obviously your department kind of helps you fine tune those skills. So yeah, you got to be able to basically know every riding position at some point, not day one, but you figure it out and you kind of just know what your role is that day. Depending on where you are, it's very specific as to what you're going to be doing. You know,
Yeah.
if I'm riding on the back step, I'm not worrying about the pump panel that day. That's not my job. And you kind of got to stay in your lane. Like you have to trust the guys you're working with that they know their riding positions because you're not. We don't have enough guys to have three of you go do this sometimes. Like, no, this one person needs to take care of this, or these two guys need to do that. But yeah, you're depending on where you're sitting that day is gonna dictate kind of what you're gonna do on scene.
That's that's cool. I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, you gotta be aligned with what you're doing. It's kinda like kickoff coverage. If one guy's going rogue, the dude's gonna fucking run right through the middle and score. Like,
Exactly. Yeah. I
stay
mean,
in your lane.
I love comparing the firehouse to sports. You know, I tell a lot of new guys the same. I ask a lot if they've played team sports because I kind of equate it to like you look at a baseball team, right? Like you're gonna have your ace pitcher who's gonna be different from your cleanup hitter, who's gonna be different from your Gold Gloves fielder. Like you don't necessarily have one guy unless you're Shohei Ohtani who does everything. You know, so you got to rely on each guys have different skills. Some guys are better at this, some guys are better at that. But you can't worry about being able to do everything at once. You got to
Yeah.
learn the job that you're in on that given day, kind of know what you're doing there and control what you can control. But you can't try to, you know, be the whole team on a call. That's you're going there, you're working with your other guys. You have to know what they're capable of doing and vice versa. And that's kind of how everything flows. Otherwise, it's just chaos.
Where at this point, where do you sit in the lineup? Where do you picture yourself as? What type of player?
Oof.
You had
That's
to
a
give
good
yourself
question.
a club.
You know, I'm certainly not going to put myself in the cleanup hitter. Yeah, you got to reserve those spots for the 20-year guys. You know,
Yeah.
the fire department's tough because there's so many aspects of the job, and you can only learn so much through training. I mean, you try to brush up on those skills and everything by simulating what could happen, but you don't always know until you arrive on scene. So I think right now, like 6 years on the fire department is still relatively junior,
Yeah.
so I'd be still slotted down towards the bottom of the lineup probably. You know, you got to give respect to the guys who have been on the job, who have seen it, who have done it firsthand. Whereas, I've seen a handful of things, but there's guys who have 25 years who still might respond to a call with like, I've never seen this before.
Well, yeah.
So having 6 years in my brain is still kind of junior. I still have a ton of stuff to learn. There's guys at the academy who told me it's like the day you stop learning stuff, then you might as well just retire because you've probably given up because it's almost impossible to learn every single aspect and be an absolute ace at every part of that.
I'm thinking like, I don't know if Brock Holt's too low, but 8 hitter Orlando Cabrera type. He was
I actually I was a big Brock Holt guy, so I'm not mad at that. I can move around a little bit.
okay.
I'm certainly not the most talented guy on the roster, but I think I can hold my own out there. If you need to call my name, then I'm going to show up.
And you're definitely like, I know you. You're a clubhouse guy through and through.
Big time. Big time. That was a big part of why I kind of wanted to get into it. I knew pretty early on. My dad was a blue collar guy, and I knew I was not really built to like sit in an office. I'm not even a big technology guy. I'm not great with the computers, all that stuff. I like doing hands on, and I like working with people. If I did work at an office job, I'd be the guy who probably didn't get anything done because I was popping around from cubicle to cubicle. So
Yeah.
I I definitely needed a clubhouse type job. That's the social game is where I think I thrive.
Well, TJ, you'd be surprised as a 10-year tech vet working in offices, the people who know nothing, but their skill is to walk around and talk to people, you can actually do all right.
Is vital to the office. Hey, you need those guys everywhere. It's a vital part of the job.
Just a little swag will get you a long way in this world.
Yeah, certainly.
So what are you working on in the house right now? You got projects going on? What are we
At
building?
home?
Yeah,
Oh yeah, big time. I got my first on the way in April.
I know.
We
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. So been busy with that. We got I got the paint brushes out. We got the room painted. I'm starting to, there's Amazon boxes at the door on a regular basis. I
Yeah.
got I don't know what to do with all this cardboard. We've been we've been breaking down all that stuff, kind of putting together furniture. So that's been the biggest projects as of lately. Definitely getting the room together, which I think I'm doing pretty good. So I got, we got 2 months to go still, but I think it's like we're pretty near finalized setup in there. So I think I'm doing pretty good on the time there. And then I'll still tinker around the house, do this and
Yeah.
that, kind of work on random stuff that I don't even know if we need, but I get restless in here sometimes.
Well, firefighter life, like it's a couple days off, like a day on, day off. Like the schedule's a little off, right? It's not.
Yeah, yeah, we do same thing. Different departments are a little different, but ours is you do 24 hours on, 24 hours off, 24 hours back on, and then 5 days off.
Okay.
So you definitely there's time to do other things. So whether you got, another job you might do on the side or, with all this snow, I've been trying to get some extra hours in plowing, stuff like that. The schedules, it's different. It's not for everybody. And I've talked to some people like, I don't know how the heck you do that. But from where I stand, like I talk to the Monday through Friday guys and I'm like, I don't know how you do that.
Yeah.
So it's all preference. When I was working at the jail, that was not a completely normal schedule either. When I did the security before that, I had done overnight shifts. I had done second shifts. So I love it personally. Gives you time to do stuff. I can, hit market basket on a weekday morning. I'm not getting smoked like the rest of you guys on the weekend.
Some of slugs in there, just like throwing elbows.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm telling you, you go to like the local barber shop, you try to get in there on a Saturday, you're toast. So I
No.
can I'll get off shift, at 7 a.m. and try to swing by there. So, obviously the sleeping away from home a couple nights a week is a different adjustment. And just, when you go into work, you lose the day completely at home. That's one thing that is a little different to get used to, which I have at this point. I've had enough time, but when you're trying to like map out your weeks, most people they're like, okay, I'll be home from work at 3 on this day, so you can still get some stuff done later in the day. Whereas you go in for us, you're like, I won't be home till tomorrow. So sometimes you got to just take care of certain things the day before because when you're gone. I leave Wednesday morning, I'm not coming back till Thursday morning. If you pick up an extra shift, sometimes you're at the firehouse for a couple days in a row without coming home.
Yeah. And that'll be different with the babies here. Katie, if you're on that long shift, just warning you, as soon as you go through the door, the baby's gonna get thrown at you and you're gonna be like on right away. You'll probably need to sleep, so I don't know how you'll do it, but
I'm not sure, I've looked at it from a few different lenses. There's a few guys in there who have recently had kids.
yeah.
So I'm definitely picking their brain early and often, trying to figure out how we can figure this out. But yeah, that is a big part of it. They step through the door and it's like your turn.
Yeah.
So I got that coming. I expect that. I don't I wonder how I'll handle the whole waking up in the middle of the night at home with the baby as opposed to, I'm used to getting woken up in the middle of the night at work. So I don't know if that'll translate at all. I don't know if we're going to have any crossover. Like I might do okay there, but who knows, man? I guess it's the same thing, case to case basis. Every kid's different. You got a hell of a lot more experience than me there.
Well, you're more trained, like, I never had any experience. I don't know. It's like you'll be in a haze. Dude, that shit goes so fast in the beginning, like, you just got it out, it's fine. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. It's just like you gotta gut it out, dude.
Yeah.
So it's like the best thing in the way. I was actually saw this guy on the internet the other day, and he was like, "It's the craziest feeling those first few months because you look at this baby and you're like, I love this person so much, but I hate my life at the moment, because
Yeah,
you just getting worked out there. So, obviously you just bank on that the joy is gonna outweigh the crappy stuff. So, I'm kind of preparing myself for some long nights and being tired and stuff, but the payoff is next level from what I've been told. So
it's the best thing in the world, dude. You got grit, dude. I'm not even half worried about you. You have the perfect demeanor for it.
I hope so, man. I hope so. I got, my brother just had his first last year. He had a little girl. We're having a little girl. So I'm definitely picking his brain a little bit. I've always kind of gone to him for advice and stuff like that. So it's kind of nice having him,
Yeah.
right around the corner who just dealt with a similar thing. So I'll be using him quite a bit, but it's going well for him and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. It'll be great. My only suggestion, get a changing pad, don't get one with the, like, cloth on it. It's a thing called a kikaroo. It's just like a rubber thing, so, like, when they shit, like, it does you don't have
You
to
don't
wash
wipe
it.
it up.
You just wipe it down. So
Yeah,
that
I think my brother's got one of those
yeah.
things.
No,
It,
that's
like,
right.
folds up, right? And you can just, like, pack it
This
and bring
one,
it with you,
they
one of those?
probably have a fold-up one. This one just sits on my kids', dressers at all times, but it's great. Like, it's never we've never had to wash it or anything, like, maybe everyone has it now, but I've seen people without it, and I just can't believe they'd have, like, cloth where the chick could get on it.
Yeah, I don't know, that doesn't seem where it seems like you're gonna have to buy a few more of those over the month, so I think that yeah. I think what you're talking about might be a little more, worth it if you can just wipe it up and move on.
Yeah. Alright, I'll let you get out of here. What do you Pat's off season. What do you got for us? What do we need
Oh,
here?
we've been talking about this at work a bit. I'm looking at we got 11 draft picks, I think. Is that
Yeah,
what is that correct? And then you got, close to like ballpark, what, 46 mil or something in cap space?
if Kraft spends it, but yeah, we're gonna
Yeah.
lock up God's though, so it's probably a ton of that's gone.
Well, you gotta pay him. He's worth every penny. But I'm
Yeah,
looking at I wanna, one of those picks, we'll see. We haven't had great luck with the receivers in the past. However, the few that we've drafted who are on the team right now don't they haven't fully busted yet. So at least there's still, there's hope for those guys. So I think you use a couple draft picks on another offensive weapon and then a pass rush, I'm thinking. And then you definitely need to look at the O line again. We got absolutely dusted in that bowl
yeah.
on the line. So I don't know if you got hope in those rookies on the left and then maybe draft a young guy to sit behind like Moses for another year. Maybe. I don't know, something like that later. And then now I'm hearing who knows what'll happen, but maybe trading a pick. And if Max Crosby gets involved, I don't know. But I would love to have that guy on the squad. But I'm looking at pass rush, O line, and another offensive weapon on the receiving.
I like it. Tyreek in or out, he just got cut. I don't know if you
I
saw.
saw that. I saw that. I'm probably leaning out on that because he's unrestricted, right? For like the first time in his career, I think it said. So what's he gonna be asking to fetch?
He's coming off of ACL, so who knows? He might be one of those 1 year, like
Prove it
30,
deal?
1 year, 25. Yeah, maybe 15. But if it's a 1 year deal, I'll pay him anything. Because that's what Drake need. I mean, if he still has anything left in the tank, I think it's worth a shot.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said is the way to go. If it's a 1 year type deal, then sure. But I'm not locking down that much money over like a 3 year deal. I
Yeah.
don't, unless it's a one with an opt out, you're a 3 year with an opt out after one, something like that. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'd kick the tires on if the price is right, as I would with a lot of guys. But knowing that dude, I don't know what he's gonna be willing to on the lower end, or if he's gonna be like, I'm the cheetah, dude. Give me, 25, 30 mil.
Yeah, team will probably get dumb and overpay for him. Or he'll just go back to the Chiefs and they'll find 30 million somehow.
That wouldn't shock me either if he
Yeah.
went back there. So we'll see. I mean, there's gonna be a lot of moving parts. They definitely they got the capital and the draft space to make a ton of moves. So it's that, and you don't know what they're gonna do with the guys who are expiring on their way out. Like
Yeah.
where's the line drawn there? Who are you gonna keep? Who are you gonna cut? Diggs had the opt out, but do you bring him back for 20? What's he making? 23 mil, something
Yeah.
like that. So I don't know. I mean, I got high hopes though. There's the options are there. So
Build up the line. That's all I ask. Can't have
yeah,
Drake turn into Burrow. That's the
no,
one thing.
you gotta have. I'd love for them to have one of those top five O lines in the league, like the
Yeah.
Lions last year, the Eagles a few years ago. It's like you put that in front of Drake. I think his ceiling is next level if you give him the time.
All right, brother. I appreciate it, man. It was a great conversation, and I'll be seeing you out there.
All right, appreciate you having me on. We'll talk to you soon. All right,
Talk to you, man.
take it easy, bro.